Hey there, Chad here, and this is an episode of Kerbal Space Program in 2022. It's been a while since my last episode, and there is an update for Kerbal Space Program 2 since I released that episode, and that is there's a date for Kerbal Space Program 2 to release, and that is February 23rd of 2023. Now, I haven't read a whole lot more about it other than the release date, and I saw that it is also on Steam at this point as its future release date, so that was good to see. There may be a bigger story there, and I suggest you go and take a look at that if you're interested in knowing more about KSP2 and when it will be launching and how it will be launching and what it's going to come with. But today, I want to talk about a project that I've been working on for a while, and that is something that a lot of people have asked about, and that is how do you do an Apollo-style moon landing? That is, how do you do a Lunar Orbit Rendezvous style mission? Now, if you're not familiar with that term, Lunar Orbit Rendezvous is what we did when we landed the Apollo program on the moon. What Apollo did is it launched into Earth orbit, and then it transferred into lunar orbit. Then the spacecraft split into two parts. There was the command module, which stayed in space, and then there was the lunar module that descended to the moon, to the body. They did their work there, and then it ascended, reconnected with the command module, and returned to Earth. So that is called a Lunar Orbit Rendezvous, and while looking into putting this episode together, I found something that was really interesting, and that is that the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous process was initially defined by a Ukrainian scientist in 1919. His name was Yuri Kondratyuk. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. My apologies if I've butchered that horribly. But this man in 1919 put together the process for how a lunar orbit rendezvous would be an efficient way of sending a man to the moon and back. Unfortunately, he was killed during World War II, and of course that was fighting for the Soviet Union against the Nazis. One other quick note, there were a couple of different proposals for how to get to the moon, and the other main proposal was what was referred to as direct descent. Direct descent is where you send an entire rocket straight to the moon, it lands on the moon, it launches off the moon, and it comes back. Pretty much one piece. Obviously there'd be stages, things like that, but there's no separation, there's no two parts to work with. Apollo was very expensive, and it was very tricky because of that, right? There was a lot of math that had to be done in order to make sure that everything worked exactly how it needed to work. Okay, so how do we put together a rocket that's going to separate into two parts, where one part goes to the planet and the other one stays in orbit and then reconnects and comes back? And how do we get started with that? Now, first of all, if you've followed my series so far, what we did is basically we made a manned mission to the moon. That was really the big deal in the overall episode. That's what our series. That's what we were aiming for. We can do this mission with the science that we currently have unlocked. I haven't gone any further, really. I might have run a couple of missions to get a little bit of cash, but other than that, nothing has been done outside of what I've already done in these episodes. So there's no new unlocks here that are necessary in order to make this happen. So we're going to go ahead and do it with what we have already. Okay, and here we are in the vehicle assembly building, and we are going to start with the Mark I 3 command capsule. And we'll go there. I'm going to drag it up a little bit because this rocket ends up getting kind of tall. We'll go with that. And before I do anything else, I want to make sure I have the right crew on board. Now, I want Jeb as my main pilot, and I want Bob as a scientist. But the part that, in practicing this, one thing I didn't consider once, and it made it very difficult. I did complete the mission, but I didn't put a second pilot on here. So we want a pilot to fly the command module while Jeb and Bob descend to the moon's surface. So that becomes kind of important. So you're going to want two pilots and a scientist. From here, we're going to basically build a fairly straightforward rocket, and I'm going to probably fast forward through a little of this, and we will see where we land. I'm going to do the science collector here, and I need to move that to make this just look a little nicer. We're going to do that with it. Okay, go back to placing things. We'll go over here. We're going to want some battery power. Okay, and that looks good. So I want to be able to get in there and right click on that, and I should be able to as necessary. So we have that going for us. I'm going to dial down the ablator a little bit. I think 160 should be plenty for what we need to do. And then I'm going to put some parachutes on here. I've started doing this a little differently. I first want to put a couple of drogue chutes. We're going to put those here. And then on the side here, we will put our main radial mounted chutes just below the window. I think that'll work. Okay, and then we do some of the typical stuff that we normally have going on here. Of course, we're using the 2.5 meter items, but we'll have that. We're going to put on big RCS fuel tank. And with that, we need to put on some RCS jets. We're going to want 4 of those. I usually kind of put those right about there. That should work. And more fuel tanks. We're going to need the 16 tank, the X216 from Rockomax. That's going to go there. We're going to put a Poodle engine on this. I think it is this one. There we go. And then this is where we do something a little different than normal. We're going to use a stack separator instead of a decoupler. So the difference is a decoupler is directional. When this decouples, the part where the arrow points separates away, and the decoupler stays with this unit here. With a separator, both halves of it move away. So the ring comes off on its own, and then this will move separately from this. Okay, so this is the first part of what we're doing. This is going to be this is basically the command module. This is what returns to Kerbal when we're done. Here is the trick. So we have this separator. The separator itself I don't think is enough to completely do what we want. So what I do is next I put the docking port that's going to be the top of the lunar module, the Mooner module, I suppose. That is what attaches directly to the separator. So that's what that ends up looking like. It looks a little awkward. I'm the first to admit that, but this does end up working, and we're going to just go forward from here. I'm next going to put on properly sized RCS fuel, and then we're going to go with an adapter. I want the bigger one. There it is. Okay. Then here's the important part. We're going with the landing can 2.0. Or I guess it's the Mark II landing can. This is what's going to end up dropping down to the Mooner surface. So we have that. Then we need another fuel tank. Landing gear is going to go on here. And I'm using the good stuff here. We'll do 4 of those. I usually drop this down as low as I can. Looks pretty good. Start it retracted. On the in-betweens, we're going to put more RCS. That'll be 4 of those. Here I'm going to basically try to do it so that the jet is just at the bottom there, just like that. Okay, I think that's everything we want here for at least that piece of it. We're obviously not done yet. There's a couple more things that we're going to have to put on here, first being an engine, right? So we're going to put a Terrier engine on here. I just keep going to the wrong things. There we go. So the Terrier engine will go here, and yes, that does look a little awkward, but it's, believe it or not, that is what we want to do. Then we were going to follow that up with another separator. Again, not the decoupler, but another separator. And then finally, you know what? I want to put a little bit of science on here. Taking this all the way down to the moon, we're gonna gather a little bit of science while we're there. Why not? Seems like the right thing to do. So we don't need 4 of those. We're going to go with 2. We will have a scientist with us just in case we wanted to reload any of these. But we'll do temperature, pressure, and we'll do a couple of goo experiments. And I think we'll just try to keep these out of the way of anything important. Okay, there we go. Then finally, to help get this into space, we are going to use one of the fairings. This is the big one. And essentially what we want to do is, because we have this kind of, in fact, there's one other thing we want to do first, and that is we want to put in some structural support. We want 4 of these, and we're basically going to go from here-ish. And it's kind of snapping me into spots there, which I guess that's fine. We're going to go from there to, I guess we'll go to the separator. There we go. Okay, so that'll give us some integrity there. Then we can right-click on the fairing and say Build Fairing. And we're just going to build this out around this part of it. This gets a little tricky. It does not like completing this, is what I'm seeing. It took me a couple of tries to get it to actually complete like it says it should. There we go. That didn't take nearly as long as I had feared. And then one of the things I want to do with the fairing is I'm going to soften the ejection force a little bit. So this makes it kind of peel away clamshell style. It's kind of cool looking. And the other thing I can do is I can give it multiple sides to break away with. We'll do that as well. We'll do 4 sides. It just kind of gives it a cool effect when it does it. No other practical reason for this part of things. Okay, so far we have our command module, and we now have what becomes our lunar lander. That's this guy right here. Now on to the actual launch vehicle. We're going to add some more fuel. We're going to add one of these 8s. We're also going to add a 16. And then right below that, we're going to put an engine. That's going to be the skipper engine. That's this guy right here. And what his job is, this is the final stage. This is what moves us from Kerbin to the moon. This will move us there, and then once in Kerbin orbit, we'll get rid of that, and in moon orbit, we'll get rid of that, and we will only have that part of the ship remaining. And then, of course, we have a decoupler here. This time it is a regular decoupler. And below that, more fuel. I think we just have a 64 tank here. And I need just a little more space up here. So click this guy. Drag him up just a hair. There we go. For this engine, we're going to use the big old mainsail. We're going to put some fins on it, keep it flying straight. We are on the 4. And to try to get these lined up. Yeah, I think that'll work. Okay. Now, this is primarily our rocket, and this is what an Apollo rocket would look like. But unfortunately, we don't quite have enough thrust for this alone to be our delivery system. So I have to put boosters on the side. So it's not, exactly like an Apollo mission, but you'll see where we're going with this in the long run. So we're going to do that. Okay. And then I'm going to put together what I am going to term as the skipper booster. And what that's going to be is a big fuel tank. Okay. Yep, that works. On top of it, one of the adapter fuel tanks. Then on that, we're going to put a cap, give it a little bit of aerodynamic capability. Yeah, I think that works. I think I want to move that down just a hair, though. Yeah, I think that's more like what we want. Back to putting things together. We'll go to engines, and we're going to put skipper engines on the bottom of this. Okay. Now, we're going to do spaghetti staging for this. If you recall, what that is when you take fuel from an outboard engine style tank, and so what this will do is fuel will first be used in the outer tanks. This tank will keep its fuel. These 3 engines will burn fuel from these tanks, basically. These tanks will continue to refuel this one while his engine fires. So what that gives us is we have as much rocket fuel as possible once these are expended. So we're, a few thousand meters in the air when we drop these off, and that gives us a benefit of having some extra fuel to work with once we're out there. Shouldn't have to do this. These fuel connectors tend to work as a strut, but I'm going to go ahead and add a strut just in case. So that'll keep these nice and steady. And then we are going to add solid rocket fuel boosters as well. And that is going to be our primary rocket. We will use the kickback. That should work. And we'll go ahead and put a cone on it. I'm going to pull that down just a fraction. And we're going to give him some stability as well with some struts. We'll do one up here. And we'll do one down here. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's not what I meant to do. Can I Control Z that? Looks like I can. Get rid of this guy. Okay, but it dropped the strut I already put on there. We'll redo that one real quick. Strut to here. Oh, I know what I did. I didn't click strut again. I should know better. All right, click here to there-ish. That'll work. That is our rocket. So how are we looking on delta V? We want to have about 4,600 delta V at full pressure on the planet based on what I've calculated. But what we look at is if we were out of the planet's atmosphere, we have 7,000 delta V. So that should be enough. That should be plenty to do what we need to do. Let's see if it works. And we will need to clean up the staging here, but I discovered a problem. I messed something up, and then of course fixing that mess up, I messed something else up. So we're just going to try to take care of all this right now. So if my last couple of comments are completely out of line with whatever I'm doing now, I apologize for that. But long story short, I did not put enough fuel on these boosters. I forgot to put one of these Rockomax X216s on the booster itself. So there we go. And then we need to add the engines, and we are in good shape there. I also want to make sure I still have the right crew, and I do not, because I went out and I came back in, it changed the seats. I don't want that. I need to fix that, and we want to put, where is he? There he is, Zellberry. I'm going to put Zellberry here. He's going to be our command module pilot. Okay, so I think that's everything here. This number looks a little, yeah, that looks pretty good actually. Okay, so let's make sure that the staging is right, and the staging might have bumped around when I went out and came back in a little bit, but we have our engines are all firing down here. Then the solid rocket boosters cut loose. Then the boosters cut loose. Then we will mess with the fairing, although that might actually have to wait until after this separation. We'll see. It's going to be kind of close. It's really, really close there. We're close on fuel to be able to get this done exactly right. The second stage booster will fire. Then that is the, that's technically the LEMS, the Lunar Module's engine. This one is, and this one is the command module engine. I think those are technically in the wrong order. I think this one is really what we'd want to use first. It's not a huge difference. A lot of this we're going to actually end up executing manually as we finish up there. I do want to say the last thing here though is we want to separate drogue chutes from the mains. This is to kind of get the capsule in the right direction, get the back end pointing downwards, just in case there's any kind of problem there. But we shouldn't really see that. I think letting them all go at once would have been fine too. Okay, that's it. I have changed the name to Achilles 8. We're going to go ahead and save that, and we're going to see if we can get this thing into orbit. Okay, it is dark out. That's okay for our purposes. That's not a huge problem. Some of the stuff we do, I'm going to want to do in the light, but that's again, that's not really a problem. We can just fast forward in time once we get to that point. So what we're doing right now, full throttle, hitting Z to power the engine all the way up. I'm going to hit T to turn on SAS, and I'm going to hit U to turn on the capsule's lights, internal lights. So we'll see that. Now, as we go up, we're going to go relatively straight for a while. I'm going to try to fly the thrust to weight ratio at about 1.5. We'll back that off a little bit, but until I get out of the thickest part of the atmosphere, I want to try to keep it at about 1.5. That'll save us a little bit of fuel, and we'll see what happens. Here we go. Pretty typical launch so far. I've gone a little longer before nosing over. Just wanted to get through a little bit more of the atmosphere. But there we go. And now I'm going to start what I talked about, flying this at about 150. No, 1.5, 150, 1.5 is what I meant. And we're about 2/3 of the way through our solid rocket boosters. Start nosing over a little more. One thing you'll notice, I did not turn on RCS, and the reason for that is some of the RCSs are inside of that fairing. I don't want to mess with that. We'll just go without RCS until the fairing is deployed. All right, I'm going to throttle up as those solid rocket boosters let go. There they go. And now we will start to nose over. We're well up in the atmosphere at this point. Should be in pretty good shape there. We'll settle in right there for now. We are now at full throttle, and we'll just stay there. We're not worried about the thrust to weight at this point. Clearly, we don't want to waste any fuel, but there's no real need to back off at this point. And there go the boosters. Pretty good shape. So I'm going to watch this number. Basically, you're going to start doing that. We're pointing horizontal now. I want to get the rocket into a circular orbit as much as possible. And we need to do that. We need to gain horizontal speed or lateral speed. So we're doing that. I'm going to watch this until this either balances out or this guy hits 90. Is kind of my magic number. When that hits 90, I know that I need to plan a node to circularize. Once we're above 70, we're in good shape. We're above the atmosphere with our apoapsis, and then it's just a matter of circularizing. But until that point, we'll just do a horizontal burn. We're at 53,000 feet, and this is starting to climb quickly, and there we go. 92 is actually what I wanted to aim for. And we will go and make a node. And in making this node, so we have 310 delta V left, meters per second of change. That is way too high for the apo. That's probably it right about there. Yep, we'll go right there. We need 185 meters a second to finish this off. We're probably above the 70 mark. Oh, we're getting there. We're not quite there yet. So when I get just a little higher, when we get to 67, we'll go ahead and eject the fairing. Probably wouldn't be a problem. You know what? We can go ahead and do that right now. Let's highlight it, right-click it, and then say deploy. And there it goes. So we no longer have the fairing, so I can turn on RCS. And the RCS will help me guide this safely to the spot I want on the nav ball, which is right there. Now this rocket is still really bulky. It's long. It makes it a very long lever. So there's a lot of energy necessary to control it. Okay, that gets us close. We need to do this burn in about 3 minutes. It's a very short burn, all things considered. It's going to be 7 seconds. We have 315 meters per second of delta V left in these tanks. So we'll have about 130 meters per second of change left once this maneuver is done. That'll be probably enough for us to get onto the lunar plane, the same plane as the moon. That will be the next step here that we'll take. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward. We'll use this button first. That'll take us to a minute from the node. And then I'll manually go just a bit, get it down under 20 seconds. There we go. That landed me at 9 seconds. I feel like I drifted there a little. We'll get that as close to centered again as possible. 2, 1, go. And I went just a hair early. I usually wait until that 0 is changing to a nothing. There we go. If we look up here, pretty darn good. I'll take that. It's a little more than 3,000 meters. In fact, we can close that up with some RCS. Looking really, really good. So we still have 130 meters per second there. That is plenty to get us aligned on the same plane as the moon. We're going to set that as target. Zoom back in a little, and this will tell us how far off we are. We're considerably off. Might take a little bit more than I was thinking, but won't be horrible. So 2.4 degrees. Just adjust. Always go the wrong way. There we go. What I like to do is basically make those lines perpendicular to where I'm at, to the tangent of where I'm at on the orbit. That's going to take 96 meters per second, so we planned our fuel almost perfectly. That's pretty darn good. Now, this is going to be an anti-normal maneuver, so I could go and line this up and take a few seconds to do that, but I'm just going to go ahead and tell Jeb to fly anti-normal. Clicking that, he will align that for us. You can see he's all excited to get to do something here. And you'll notice that our node is lined up pretty much identical to that. It's actually not perfect, but I think over time as it drifts closer, it would probably drop right on there. Now, here's the thing. I don't want to tell Jeb to hold that position. I just wanted him to get there. At this point, I'm just going to turn on stability assist again. The reason for doing that is when I'm ready to move the rocket, if I change the attitude at all, it would continue to try to fire back to this. That could be problematic because I will probably forget if I don't do this now. So I went ahead and hit stability assist, and that's where we're at. We have 10 minutes to this burn. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward again. And we are in the sun. So we're going to do a couple of things here. We will do this burn. Get that under 20 seconds again. Okay, so we will do the burn, and then we will do the next step in our rocket process. And this is a decent burn, so there we go, and done. Let's see how well we did. Kill this. Pretty good. I'll take that. I wanted this to be right about here. So where we're at, I will not complain with that at all. Okay. The next part of the mission is going to entail separating this. Oh, one thing I will do here, we will go ahead and jettison this part of the ship. And there it is. And I think, yeah, that's the next engine we want. So I'm going to go ahead and activate that engine, even though it's not running. And then we're just going to give it a little bump of speed there. That gets us away from there. And then we are going to turn prograde. Once again, I'm going to tell Jeb to go prograde, and then I'm going to cancel that out by going back to stability assist once he's lined up. Okay, I think this is a good spot to stop this video. We'll have a part 2. That is the next step in this. I think this will be a 3-parter. We'll do a landing, a lunar landing, and a return to Kerbin. So we'll cut this one right here. I hope you're able to stay and watch the next part of this. That will be the exciting part where we merge this back up and separate it and do all that fun stuff. But until then, thanks for your time, and I hope you're able to continue right on. But if not, I'll see you next time. Fair travels.